Oh, yes, and we're going to be talking about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which has been signed by the president in Niamey in that ceremony you see there. So that picture did circulate in the country. So there are lots of perspectives on this matter. Well, of course, you'll always have those who think it's a good thing and some others who may have reservation about what to expect and how do we ensure we cover the loose ends in all of this moving forward. So to shed some light on this particular signing, Dr. Obiebo King, Ricardo Obiebo King joins us here today. He's a consultant in technology and innovation management. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, this has been signed now, so, but first of all, what is your impression? Now that this has been signed, is it a good thing or you have some reservations?
I'll say the ideals of the agreement, there's nothing really wrong about that. When you look at the ideals in terms of you're trying to promote trade and in sort of generate more trade within Africans. In that ideal form, the idea is not, you can't fault it. But the problem always comes with the details that come in enabling this idea to come into fusion. So when you start looking at the idea, the details, then you have to look at what the implications are going to be. Because for each party, there is something that you are expected to profit or gain in signing such an agreement. When you take the case of Nigeria as it is right now, you have to be looking at what exactly what do we aim to get out of it, because the agreement in broad form, it's more of like you're creating a market. It's a market development plan. The question for us as a nation is, are we in that, is the timing okay for us right now?
Okay, we'll talk about that and more when we come back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. So why do you think that the timing is not right?
I think if we look at in the life of our nation right now, you will say the trajectory of our development is on, we really need to do more of like product development right now. You can even see from the little intro you did right now, we're talking about our industrial base. We don't have the industrial base right now. We have electricity problems. We have problems also with fuel, diesel. Our refineries are not working very well. So when you talk about, so if you actually have to look at the what we should be as a nation, a strategic priority right now should be more about product development, developing things that we can offer the world.
Yeah.
We already have a market, which we don't have the capacity
but the thing is,
to fill.
The question will then be, having seen that this didn't just happen, it's been in the works for a while. Sure. Countries knew that this was they were working towards getting this done. And will there ever be a time that will be right for us to sign it if we didn't sign it now?
I think then you come back to the question of whether a bird in hand is worth more than two in the bush. Because we have a market. We're struggling to get to potential to match our own market in-house. And we are going out to go into market development where we're going to stretch into the whole continent now.
Yeah, isn't this going to make us wake up and smell the coffee? Because look, if we don't, since we're not going to be playing with the rest of Africa, it's up to us now to put our house in order.
And that's the other thing that we do not realize. This is not just about Africa. This agreement has far wider implications. It's the biggest agreement for the world in terms of the way the world deals with Africa. Okay. So it's going to have implications for FDI. Yeah. It's going to have implications for any investor coming to Africa.
What implication does it have for trade, especially when you have to look at tariffs? Because this predominantly, as you said in the opening sequence, that this is a trade plan?
Yeah, if you're going to just, that's why I say it is more than tariffs. If you look at it, tariffs are just like the minute point of this agreement where you're talking about trade within Africans.
Yeah, but the part that they spoke about origin of those products, doesn't it take care of some of these concerns? If it's finished product, it has to be wholly made in Africa. But if you're coming to some other areas, about 70% has to be sourced from Africa.
Yes, those are still the minor parts of this agreement when this thing kicks in. I'll take you just a simple example. Take the EU. When the EU signed theirs, Ireland automatically reduced its corporation taxes. And the next thing you have is Dell comes into Ireland and sets shops there, and from that point, it does its business all over Europe. So you have big multinationals going to a point instantly that has low factors of production. They reduce their cost and they leverage from that point. So you are going to, when this thing kicks in full, you are going to have smaller African countries punching above their weight.
In fact, speaking about that, sorry, just to follow up on this one, I was just wondering, as a result of when we said that, look, countries knew that this was coming. We have some other smaller West African countries. We know what they did with their tax. Some of them waived certain taxes. Some of them said, look, it's better for these goods and services to come in here first, and then you can tax later. So we saw all of those things, but we didn't take our own steps. So can we then blame the agreement if we don't do our own?
That's why I say every nation has to look at it from its own perspective, not just because the idea is good.
But because it's workable.
Because you are going to have winners and losers at the end of the day. And when you're talking about winners and losers, you're going to see take our neighbor Ghana. They've already started a product development approach that they have first mover advantage on. They are already, they've set up a scheme of one district, one factory, trying to make products. What have we done?
Now, doesn't this also beg the question from what Chamberlain said earlier that, you know, we only have, every individual African country has itself to blame if it wasn't prepared, because you know, of course, for instance, that the African Economic Community, you know, had this as part of the plan. You know, since the 90s when the African Economic Community came on board, the free trade zone was part of the plan. So
that's why where I started, I said it's a question of timing, because you have to look at yourself to see, are you ready? Are you ready to go?
It's taken almost 30 years.
Yeah, it's not a question of whether it's taking 20 years. It's whether we as a country, are we ready for what we are getting into? Because we have a market. You see, it's different. We have a market. This market can still get us foreign investment. We can still leverage this market in negotiation.
Okay, let me. I want you to please be very open and, you know, blatant with us here. This signing this deal doesn't stop whatever conversation any country is having with China. Doesn't stop any, you know, international trading and all of that. How does this impact positively or negatively?
No, it's going to, because you see, we are actually, okay, let me put this agreement in a sort of simple form, is that you are trying to band together so that you have some kind of bargaining power. And if you're going, it's like the states in Nigeria now. As all the states are not negotiating with China or the UK or that, we use the Nigerian federal government to negotiate. So that's why we have a big market. Okay. So the same thing, that's why if you look at the treaty, by the time everything, this agreement, when it gets in place, you're going to have ministers, you're going to have trade ministers, you're going to have people who will negotiate on behalf
of Nigeria.
Of Nigeria and the whole continent.
So you are concerned about the productive capacity of each country?
I'm looking at it from our own point of view,
okay,
not the rest of Africa.
Okay, from the Nigerian, from the Nigerian perspective, you are concerned about the productive capacity?
Not just our production, because there are I said we're also going to look at FDI inflows, because like when, another case in point, when the US was signing NAFTA, they didn't realize that even factories that were right there in the US while they were signing it will move production out because production was going to be cheaper outside the US. So these are things that...
Do you see a situation, I'm sorry, do you see a situation now that, say, Nigeria is having this power supply challenge? Do you see industries moving out of Nigeria because of this kind of treaty?
It could. You can't roll that out. Take Lagos and Ogun State.
Okay, let's go to Abuja and get some perspective from there as well.
Well, we have heard the submissions of Dr. King. We now have in our studios Tochukwu Ifemene, who is a facilitator and faculty member of the Institute for National Transformation International. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Mokwe.
Well, you have heard there the submissions of Dr. King, and he's very worried because he has said that at the end of this, there are going to be winners and losers, and he doesn't think that we're going to be one of those who are winning. Do you agree with him and some of the reasons that he stated there?
I beg to differ, but I appreciate his concerns because he's concentrated presently now on the current realities on ground here in Nigeria, okay? But for me, I think the advantages far outweighs the disadvantages. So, for example, by the time we start exporting some of our agricultural products, knowing that Nigeria is going to be the largest market going out from Africa, that was why I believe that the president did a form of due diligence by not rushing to sign earlier, okay? But by coming back to sign right now, I believe that we are going to come back to strengthen our infrastructural systems at home, and we have to do it. For example, the central bank governor has given his 5-year policy, and inside that policy, there's going to be a lot of credits that is going to be given out to institutional bodies in Nigeria and also individuals to make sure that they sit up. I'm sure and I know that the federal government's policy on standardization will come up to ensure that we have quality products that we go out. We have to give attention to the challenges that he has identified, the issues of power, yes, the issue of bottlenecks in our system, yes. But this is a big opportunity that I think that Nigeria needs to leverage on. For me, I think Nigeria is already doing a lot within the African continent. For example, when you look at the a very silent directorate in Nigeria, a powerful directorate, but they keep on doing certain things that we've not taken notice for. The Directorate of Technical Aid Corp, okay? We've been giving out a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of services, okay? We've helped universities there, we've helped medical institutions. If not because of that directorate, Ebola would have taken a lot of African countries. So I know that we're already doing a lot in Africa from Nigeria, but we need to strengthen our infrastructural systems. For me, I look at something that is happening in Nigeria, which is the, innovation. A lot of Nigerians are highly innovative, but they are always looking for how we're going to push these things out. The federal government is now under a pressure to ensure that we strengthen those systems so that all these kind of ideas that we are bringing out, we actually go out and actually make sure that we have standardized systems, standardized product, quality products, made in Nigerian product and made by Nigerian products.
Yeah, but don't you think that there some of these things should have been, like this standardization which you talk about now, shouldn't we have put it in place? In the 1 year that we were, you know, I'm still wondering whether we're going to sign this or not, wondering whether we're going to be ready to sign or not. Shouldn't we have put them in place before we eventually signed?
I believe we're supposed to have done that. And I believe the president would have been well advised by now on the implications of signing without Nigeria being a big player. Because I see Nigeria being the biggest and most strategic player in this. So what comes to place now when the president comes back and with our heads is that we must begin, first of all, to communicate these matters in such a way that every sector, especially the real sector in Nigeria, we sit up to ensure that we meet up with this demand. Because trust me, if Nigerians don't sit up to meet up with this demand, definitely we're going to be hit by it.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to hold on. Let's go to Lagos now and continue the conversation from there.
Thank you, Mark. Well, what he's talked about there in terms of, yes, the potentials there, and he was also looking ahead saying, look, all of those products, beg your pardon, all of those policies that are on ground at the moment, by the time we start, we'll take advantage of it.
You just said it, by the time. You see, we are dealing with our neighbors who are small and nimble. And when in strategy you're talking about small and nimble, they have power in place, they don't have so much disruption. they are ready to produce. You are not ready to produce. So by the time you get to production, little drops of water can fill an ocean. So you have a lot of countries who are going to be producing and trying their best to see how they can take advantage of this agreement.
But when production in the areas of agriculture, for instance, if that is to be put into consideration, would you then say to consolidate further on agriculture, we need to make agriculture such that it is developed in blocks? By that I mean, say, the middle belt, if they are strong in the production of tubers, they concentrate on that. If the north is stronger in production of grains, they stay on that, and then we can have sectional development of agriculture in line with the diversification and the development of that sector. You're talking
about specialization. That's why I said, in our strategic trajectory as a country, we are in product development, trying to develop products that can go into the market. So if you actually analyze Nigeria carefully, you see even agriculture you are talking about, we are not able to fill our market, because if we are producing at the rate we are supposed to be producing, everything will be low, food will be low, but we are still importing. So if you look, I'm not trying to run down things, but I'm trying to bring the reality home that yes, and the agreement, the idea of the agreement is good, but you have to look at yourself and look at how do you fit in.
So how do we fit in? What's the missing link? What are the elements that are missing now?
What's missing for us right now is products, because it's like you...
So we do not have products that we can take to the market?
Apart from cement, right now, as a country, cement is the only thing I can comfortably say, yes, we, as a nation, we can satisfy our domestic demand perfectly and push out to the rest of the world.
Other than that, we have nothing else.
Other than that...
No, not that one. Maybe
I'm talking about where you talk about excess capacity. Because China, when you talk about China, you talk about all these nations, it is excess capacity they push out, an overflow. So you go into, you have products, you produced it to an overflow, and you go into market development, you're pushing it.
Can we capitalize, Nigeria, in this instance, because of this deal? Can we capitalize on, say, solely on agricultural products, such that we're able to do away with the groceries that we see from grocery establishments and what do you call them now, franchise that we see in Nigeria from other countries?
Bottom line, you find that if you just do only agriculture, you are limited in terms of commodity. You are just limited to commodity pricing, because the money is in processing, food processing. So if you cannot get an industrialization strategy in place where you are going to be processing, that's why you see the CBN governor. I mean, before the CBN governor is telling us that at independence we had 180 textiles industries. Today we have 15. So you have to look at what, and then we still have power problems. So we have to look at this agreement that we have gotten into and look at how we can maximize it now.
Because why do you think the president was a little... I'm sorry.
We need to go to Abuja on this. Apologies. Well, Dr. Obiebo King, we appreciate your comment on this morning. He's a consultant in technology and innovation management, so raising some concerns about that. But let's get to Abuja and see what policies and solutions and the optimism shared by the guest there. Marpa.
Yes, indeed. Well, Mr. FNMA is still here, and we are still talking about the AfCFTA. Now, you have said that, indeed, the standardization should have been put in place, but you're optimistic because of agriculture and some, industries which are, given good products. Don't you also see a situation whereby we could be holding the short end of the stick? Remember sometime, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, when agriculture began to pick up, especially rice and grains, when we noticed that in Nigeria it was getting more and more expensive, not because there was a scarcity, but because the outside market was offering a better price to some of our farmers, so they prefer to take their products outside. Do you think that in that regard we could be having a disadvantage?
Yeah,
where the outside market becomes more attractive than the inside market?
Yes, actually, in conducting our SWOT analysis on that, that's actually a threat. A threat in the sense that if we don't get our institutional systems right, we even have indigenous bodies going outside to produce and import back to Nigeria. But I see a system where the government has begun to put a lot of checks on that. So, for example, NASA, that came up some years ago, is ensuring that our farmers are taken care of, okay? That's a government intervention that is already on ground. The central bank has its interventions on ground, okay? When we come about knowledge dissemination, we also have systems on ground, okay? What I just want to keep on saying and bringing as an emphasis for us to appreciate what we have, because I believe in this very, very, very strongly, is that Nigeria has a huge opportunity to increase her GDP. How? Consider the arable lands that we have in Nigeria. Okay, the North have not done maybe perfectly better, let's say in the agricultural pyramids that have gone defunct, okay? But with the coming in of this policy, we are forced, permit me to use that word, to develop every sector in Nigeria to ensure that we are not kicked out at the bargaining table. If not, we will become the dumping site. So I guess that is the reason why the president had to step up. Okay, it was said in one of the reports that countries with labor-intensive activities, okay, we tend to have more job creation abilities. Okay, so we'll create job opportunities in the country by ensuring that we have agricultural systems, agricultural production capabilities, okay, which the agreement is always looking at. And I know that Nigeria can feed the whole nation, or Nigeria can feed the whole of Africa, okay? We look at other countries like Dubai, for example, they've become a technology, a tourism hub. I see Nigeria becoming an enterprise hub because we have what it takes. We have the skilled manpower, and I think one of the best in Africa, I dare to say. We also have the arable lands.
We already have a situation where it's becoming, I mean, we have a drain, so to speak, on the skilled manpower. If they're not leaving out the shores of Africa, they're leaving the shores of Nigeria. How do we ensure that with this free trade agreement, we are not losing our valuable resources to other African countries?
Well, I believe that the federal government, with all the actions that we have seen the president doing in the last 4 years, and even in this year, even his pledge to see that we alleviate poverty, I see a spirited move by them. In fact, I believe that they are constrained, and they will be constrained going forward to ensure that this brain drain stops. If not, we'll be at the losing end. I know that the government is aware about this threat. Trust me, it's a very, very big threat. But also I know that we have seen our strengths that we have. Our arable land, I keep on emphasizing on our arable land because one of the things that we are going to give out from Nigeria is going to be agricultural products. We've done that before. Nigeria have been doing that before, okay? And we were even known for that even before the boom of the oil. So the onus is on the government now. And I also want to say too, the onus is also on the private sector, even on the media, to ensure that we keep on amplifying this for Nigerians to know the great opportunities that we have. The private sector also need to begin to double up their effort, One of the things that the government has started to do now is trying to see how they can shrink their bottlenecks. So for example, you even see CAC, the process of ease of doing business in CAC has actually greatly improved. I can commend the government on that, okay? Also, the government, knowing that we've had bottlenecks issues over the years, and knowing that if we don't become the largest producer to attract a lot of inflow for GDP into the country, not only are we going to be at the back end table, but our agreements, our multilateral agreement, our bilateral agreement will also be threatened. So I see a president that is already aware about this.
Yeah, but even that is even with the constraint on the cost of production, especially when you look at electricity as a major component. How do you think that's going to affect us?
It could affect us, because we must confront the brutal facts on ground now. Because if we don't put the issues of electricity squarely, trust me, production is going to leave out Nigeria. So for me, my faith and my belief in the federal government, and one of the advantages of what we need to do in this right now, because we have technically 2 years to get a lot of things right, this year and next year, for the government to show true political will in ensuring that we get this. For me, I think that is very key, and that's very cardinal. And I think the presidency has recognized it. I think directorates in the government have recognized it. And like I keep on saying, what the central bank focus is for the next year, they will not want to give out funds to systems that are going to break down. They will not want to give out funds knowing that power could also be a threat. So if you look at the power policy of the government in what they're trying to do right now, I know that there's going to be a pressure for them, because the truth is that the government has to get it right. In fact, it's not an option.
Do you think that it is important that some sectors are protected? I mean, of course, you have a free trade agreement, but there will be certain areas that you still think need to be protected. Do you see any of those areas coming up?
Oh yes, definitely.
What areas do you see in that regard?
I see the areas of which is going to be in the phase 2 of the free trade agreement. First of all, the intellectual property rights, okay? Because we're not going to be doing things where another person will just copy and we're just going to bastardize. I see us making sure that we have protection in our payment system, even though we're going to have a unified system, okay, in the trade finance agreement and trade payment systems, okay? So we need to be protected, because everybody knows that the banking system of Nigeria is one of the best in Africa. Our central bank is one of the best in Africa. So our bilateral agreement that we need to protect, especially in our intellectual property, in our payment systems, in our infrastructural systems, okay, needed to be protected. Because if it's not protected, then it's still going to be another threat. But I don't want to always look at the threat side, okay? And neither do I want to also always look on our weakness side. The government, in fact, from the last administration, has a strong team that is already looking into all this. I can tell you the truth, the government knows about all these threats and all these weaknesses, trust me. But they know that they have to get it right. Because for me, this is the economic prosperity that Africa have been wishing for. This is the economic prosperity that Nigeria herself has been looking for. And chiefly among one of the things that we need to protect ourselves is the harmonization of how, for example, our food, our drugs, okay? You know those requirements, sometimes you want to do something in NAFDAC and it's taking you almost years. You're having a lot of bottlenecks. I think the government has to do a lot of that, okay? Both on our food systems, in standard organization of Nigeria, we need to make sure that we come up immediately, because we're going to have a harmonized African standard, okay? Like the EU, they have their standard. In the United Arab Emirates, they have their standards of which their goods must be globally competitive. So
standards need to be set, and it is important that we set those standards as soon as possible. And you are very optimistic about this African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Oh, definitely.
Isn't that right?
Definitely.
Well, I hope that you're also looking at the opportunities that are inherent, because whether or not we like it, it seems it's come to stay. It's been signed right now. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Tochukwu Ife-Mene is a facilitator and faculty member, Institute for National Transformation International. Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
Thank you.